Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment. But first, some of today's top stories. A proposed city ordinance could beef up the penalties that older people have to pay for committing ethics violations. Under the proposal, sponsored by 43rd Ward Alderwoman Michelle Smith, fines would jump from $5,000 to $20,000 for ethics violations. The Chicago Board of Ethics, charged with adjudicating these violations, supports the proposal. This comes amid a wave of federal indictments and convictions lately, the most recent being former 11th Ward Alderman Patrick Daley Thompson. And there's much more on this story on our website. Several dozen convictions tied to a disgraced former Chicago police sergeant have been vacated. A Cook County judge today tossed 44 convictions tied to former Sergeant Ronald Watts. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox supported the dismissals. That brings the total amount of vacated convictions tied to Watts to 212. Watts and others on their tactical team have been accused of repeatedly extorting residents and guests at the Ida B. Wells housing project for more than a decade back in the early 2000s. Demolition crews were at work tearing down the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church in Englewood today. The building was deemed unsafe by building inspectors and ordered to come down after it caught fire last Friday. The Chicago Fire Department has said the fire was sparked accidentally by a propane torch. The Chicago Department of Buildings has said they will, quote, work closely with the leadership of the church as they deal with the loss of this historic community pillar. Chicago Bulls are getting ready for their first home playoff game in 5 years. And the tip-off comes after the Week in Review, of course, so no need to switch the channel. The series is tied 1-1 after the Bulls pulled off a thrilling road victory on Wednesday night in Milwaukee behind DeMar DeRozan's electric 40-point performance. The Bucks will be without key player Chris Middleton as the Bulls look to take the lead in this series against the defending NBA champs. And now on to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Steve Daniels of Crane Chicago Business, Lorraine Forte of the Chicago Sun-Times, Mike Flannery of Fox 32 News, and our very own Amanda Vinicky. And let's get right to it. At the end of a City Club speech earlier this week, Mayor Lori Lightfoot hinted at a re-election run next year. Take a look.
We have faced unprecedented challenges, and we have met those challenges head-on with unprecedented resolve and coming together. And we've made a difference in the lives of our residents, and more to do. So thank you all for continuing to choose Chicago and the people who call it home. And oh, by the way, for those of you who came today expecting a different announcement, not today, but soon. Be patient. Thank you all.
Mike Flannery, kind of a campaign-style speech, but not an official announcement. Her argument before the City Club is Chicago is bouncing back from COVID like gangbusters. Is that a compelling case to make?
I think there's something to it, and I think look, she's been giving for 8 or 10 months campaign-style speeches from time to time. She has announced a summer of joy in conjunction with the Chicago Park District.
Not to be mistaken with Summer of George, but go ahead.
Right. She's praying that there is something to be joyful about this summer. Look, she, like everybody from President Biden on down, President Trump before him, who had to deal with this coronavirus, has had a tough hand. It's worth remembering that as she contemplates running again, she got about 17% of the vote in the first round. And that was enough to get her into that runoff with Tony Preckwinkle. If we have a huge multi-candidate field again, it's not clear whether we will. She could be in the runoff.
And Amanda Vinicky, why choose to give this campaign-style speech, but then at the end say, oh, wait, I don't have an announcement quite yet?
Well, we'll all cover both of them, right? So why not stretch it? If you have an audience, you have a platform to give a campaign-style speech, it gets coverage, you get to carry your message, and then you get it again. Why not? I don't necessarily feel like I'm on pins and needles waiting for the mayor to announce whether she's going to run. It's a matter of when, and it'll happen sooner than later, I venture.
As you see this field shake out. Lorraine Forte, what is Lightfoot's narrative here on the issue of crime, which has remained persistently high?
Well, the one thing that she and Superintendent Brown always point out is that, number one, crime has gone up across the country. It's not just a problem in Chicago. They point out that, their efforts to reform the police department, to fight crime, have been hampered, by COVID. And certainly the department has been losing a lot of officers, and a lot of officers, during the height of the pandemic were sick. So they point to, we are making progress. They certainly like to point to, when they make high profile arrests, et cetera. So they're pointing to, look, this is not just something that's a Chicago phenomenon. We are making progress. We're making, more arrests for carjackings, and we're standing up to want people who are accused of violent crimes held accountable. So they point to the fact that this isn't just a problem in Chicago, and point to the successes.
And Steve Daniels, also this week, Mayor Lightfoot's gas card proposal, gas giveaway here, passed narrowly in a city council committee. Is it a shoo-in to pass the full city council, do you think?
I don't, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's clearly gotten a lot of pushback from aldermen. I'm not comfortable making predictions about what's going to happen in the full council. I'm going to guess that it'll probably squeak through at the end of the process. But I think that what has emerged from all of this debate is, well, she's been accused of basically a campaign gimmick here, which I think, is a reasonably fair accusation in some sense, because, she is requiring notification by getting, the governor, I'm sorry, not she, but she's, in essence, what's happening here is Willie Wilson, who is a mayoral candidate himself, has been sponsoring these free gas days where people line up in their cars for, cars on end, and she wants to compete with that. And she's the mayor. She's able to compete with public money, and I think that's where some of the pushback came from. Hey, could this money be spent better elsewhere, rather than competing with a very, very wealthy man who is trying to curry favor with potential voters.
Certainly discomfort there, but Mike Flannery, where's the ethical line if a declared candidate for mayor is spending $3 million on these giveaways, or Mayor Lightfoot is putting her name, on a gift card? Is it coming up to the line of ethics problems?
Oh, I think it's over the line. She's so far over the line. It's a ridiculous political stunt. There is no doubt she's going to win favor with some voters with it. The venture cards that are going to go out, I think 100,000 of those for CTA riders. And then these 50,000 gas cards that are going to go out, I think worth $150. Who's not going to love that? That's another good reason, though, for her not to make an announcement of a candidacy until she finishes giving those out. But listen, the Summer of Joy at the Park District, the lotteries that will be giving these gas cards and CTA venture cards out are supposed to roll out all through the summer. In August, if she is going to run, she's going to have her minions out collecting voter signatures on nominating petitions. So it all elides together very nicely.
So there's a nice little ramp up here. Lorraine Forte, but what about Willie Wilson and those gas giveaways? I mean, as a declared candidate for mayor, is there an ethics problem here?
Well, I mean, anytime you're a candidate or, a mayor, who's obviously going to run for re-election, I think it is an ethics problem. You look like you're trying to buy votes. I mean, there's nobody that I've spoken to that doesn't get that impression. And Willie Wilson, he is a generous man. He's known for giving away money. He gave away, handed out cash at churches in previous years when he was running for mayor. So, yeah, it does look like you're trying to buy votes. There's just no way it doesn't look like that.
And his announcement for mayor came pretty in close conjunction with those giveaways. Amanda Vinicky, also this week, we saw federal prosecutors go to bat strongly for Danny Solis in this deferred prosecution agreement, saying that he did really well in his assignment to help bring down Madigan, ComEd, and Ed Burke. Are you surprised that prosecutors gave Solis such high grades for his cooperation here?
I mean, I have not spoken with any federal prosecutors about how often this is, but they in fact use the word extraordinary in describing Solis. And I would say that that is an assessment that, as a political journalist who is following it, certainly he's played an extraordinary role in bringing down two, or at least, of course, obviously, Alderman Ed Burke is still on the city council, and both he and former House Speaker Mike Madigan are fighting these charges and say that they are innocent of any sort of wrongdoing. Nonetheless, Solis played a key role in these two huge political figures. So it is sort of an extraordinary place in history in Chicago politics, the role that he played and the length of time that he did it.
Right.
And by the way, interestingly, I actually was looking back. Solis had said early on that he had hoped, I believe the Sun-Times actually reported that he hoped one day he would be perceived as a hero for his role. And so I don't know if that's the case, but certainly in the eyes of prosecutors a bit.
Well, even in the prosecutors are using similar language, saying Mike Flannery, he had a choice to make. He could have fought this like nearly every other politician, but he accepted the accusations against him, his own bribery accusations, made a choice, put on a wire, and went and got hundreds of hours of wiretaps.
Okay, let's give him credit for that, but let's give Mayor Lightfoot credit for some of the things that she has, observations she's made about this, and many others have as well. So Alderman Solis was a grifter, a crook, an extortionist. He used his role on the city council's, as chair of the zoning committee, to just walk around and say, stick them up to folks who needed approval from that committee. And, it does bother me. Yeah, I give him credit for the cooperation, but it bothers me that he's going to get off scot-free. He's going to walk away with that city pension. That's what the feds are doing here with this do not prosecute deal. They're not making him plead guilty to one count. They're charging him with one count, and they're allowing him to plead not guilty. And then they're saying at the end of all this, in a few years, we'll drop this charge. So
right.
You get to keep your city pension.
Paris, can I say something about that?
Sure, absolutely. Go ahead, Steve.
So I think this isn't so much about this case; it's about the next one.
Next couple.
Well,
yeah,
I'm just
exactly.
Not even one's 10 years from now. I mean, what the prosecutors are trying to establish is, if you're willing to cooperate fully in this kind of way, this is the kind of treatment you will get. So that will then encourage people who are caught red-handed, as Solis was, to then turn around and do this and capture far bigger fish than they themselves are. I mean, Mike's points are well taken, but that's the game here. That's what prosecutors are trying to accomplish with this sort of an arrangement, and it makes tons of sense, especially in a state as corrupt as this one.
Lorraine Forte, is that the calculation the mayor's making here and saying, you know what, we're not going to intervene here and ask that you prosecute Solis because of the impact that he had on the city with this alleged corruption? We're going to back off of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, let the feds do their job. It seems like she's saying, let them, they made an arrangement with him. I mean, you give him credit or not give him credit. He did it so that he could avoid prosecution. He's a big fish. He was able to give him, two bigger fish. So,
to me,
what he can get.
It was sort of a miscalculation, perhaps, for the city to come out and say that they were going to oppose this deal and then have the law department back away. As a former prosecutor, you would have think these were considerations that Lightfoot would have made before then, discussions perhaps with the U.S. attorneys and sort of surprise, we don't like this deal, and then backing away. Nonetheless, I think that that's going to blow over when we talk about why voters are making their choices with Lightfoot. This is not going to be at the top of the
Well, right. We have to remind our viewers that last week Lightfoot said she was going to issue a victim impact statement on behalf of the city and backed off that. And in a related note, Steve Daniels, you wrote about ComEd coming forth and saying, hey, you know, we admitted to all this corruption and bribery, but also we want a $200 million rate hike from consumers. Is this a warranted rate hike?
Well, it's under the law. It's certainly what they can do, and this is the bind that the state of Illinois has put itself in. It passed a law that, at the time, what was highly questionable, one of the most favorable rate treatments any utility in the entire country got. This is back in 2011. We now know that bribery that ComEd's admitted to had something to do with the passage of that law, which was, by the way, enacted over the veto of a Democratic governor. But that's ancient history. At this time, this law is about to expire. This is ComEd's last hurrah under the formula rate. And there's really nothing the Illinois Commerce Commission can do against this. The legislature, I guess, conceivably could retroactively exclude it, but they would be taken to court. So, but
I'm sure they'd be hearing it from a lot of lobbyists as well.
Yeah. That's what the story basically said, was that the formulaic aspects of financing were the reason for the $200 million, not all of the wonderful investments that ComEd touted when it put the release out about the law, not the, green energy and this, that, and the other. I mean, that's part of it, but that's not the majority of it. Most of it's just simply rising interest rates, and that's why your electric bill is going to go up.
Well, and Steve, interestingly, $200 million, the amount of the rate hike, we have to remember that is the amount, by the way, that ComEd or Exxon has to pay back.
Amen, sister.
Just a coincidence there.
Right? Well, and by the way,
legal bills.
Great story, Steve. Right. But it's not ancient history, of course, because while it is ancient history, it's playing out in two ways now, both from ratepayers' pockets, number one, and also, again, the Madigan investigation, indictment, and coming trial.
And this is only going to get worse. That's the other thing, too.
So more shoes to drop. It's amazing to think about that. Let's move on to some state news. Governor J.B. Pritzker and Democratic lawmakers celebrate the passing of Illinois' $46.5 billion budget. Take a look.
Balancing the budget allows us to stoke job creation across Illinois. We're providing grants to bars and restaurants and other small businesses, along with arts and cultural institutions, to help them manage through the financial recovery from the pandemic. And we're suspending licensing fees to provide a little extra help in their recovery.
And Mike Flannery, let's stay on politics, because clearly the governor wants to use this as a coup as he runs for re-election. He spent $10 million on ads so far, a lot of those attacking Richard Irvin on the Republican side, who's backed by Ken Griffin. Irvin, with all that Ken Griffin money, has spent about $10 million on ads as well. What's the thought in spending so big right now in a primary?
Well, look, I just go back to what David Axelrod has been saying all year about this governor's race. And Democrats all across the country need to get this message. This is not a cakewalk. If J.B. Pritzker thinks he's going to just waltz in, he should think again. And I don't think he thinks he's going to waltz in. So that's why he's spending big. That's why all that Ken Griffin money is being put to use by the Irvin campaign. And, we've also seen Jesse Sullivan and Darren Bailey. Darren Bailey now has some of the Dick Uihlein money. This is a real brawl, and the governor is dabbling in the Republican primary as well. And he's trying to win over some of those moderate voters worried about Illinois' swoon into near junk credit status. He's running TV commercials. Some of those TV commercials cite the upgrades. We just got another one from Moody's this past week on the credit
rating upgrade. Well, and you mentioned all the billionaires here. Dick Uihlein with $2.5 million into the coffers of Republican candidate Darren Bailey. Lorraine Forte, in this brawl of the billionaires, who's going to come out on top? So we've got
whoever's
Griffin,
got the most
Pritzker,
money.
Uihlein.
Who's the richest?
Well, Griffin is the richest out of all of them.
And you know what? Whoever spends the most money, and I hate to say it, whoever spends the most money on the most negative ads, because negative ads, you know, they work on, you know, and it's not a cakewalk. And, you know, whoever spends the most money on the most negative ads.
Can I, on that note,
maybe.
Let me throw this out, though. On that note, Lorraine, because the other thing that I see on these TV commercials is all these dark money groups airing ads against Irvin or against Pritzker. Does anybody know who's funding those dark money groups?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that the fact checkers and the political reporters are going to be digging into. And, you know, a lot can change between now and not just the primary, but certainly November. I mean, you never know what is going to come out.
Well, we know.
I'm certainly not a prognosticator, but you just never know what is going to come out in the coming.
Well, if I could jump in for a second, Lorraine, Paris, we know that the Democratic Governors Association, the DGA, is running some of those attack ads, independent expenditure attack ads against Richard Irvin. Several $1 million they're spending and are likely to spend on that might be traced back to the several $1 million they received from J.B. Pritzker a while ago. So the Democrats appear not to want Richard Irvin to be the Republican nominee.
But I noticed another attack. All right, go ahead, Amanda.
They want it to be Darren Bailey because Darren Bailey is very conservative, very popular. So that's why I'm not actually sure that this is going to come down to money at this point in time. Darren Bailey has a lot of name recognition that he gained through fighting a lot of COVID mitigations and otherwise sort of becoming a conservative big name in politics, particularly those who vote in a Republican primary. So that's, I think, the playbook here, right? That Democrats are trying to sink Irvin, who they see as having an opportunity to be more successful against Pritzker in the general election. If they get rid of him in the primary, then they would have an easier general. And by the way, I also want to say, I mean, we played the budget clip. I think we cannot talk about all of the measures and talking about Lightfoot and campaigning with gas giveaways when the state is offering a whole lot of tax relief as well in this budget. And we already have campaign ads about that.
Yeah, and will Governor Pritzker or some other office holder sign their name on those checks that are going to go right into the pockets of Illinoisans?
Exactly.
Do we know the answer to that?
We know that it will be a constitutional officer. Yes, it will have to be signed, whether it will be the treasurer, the comptroller, the governor, all three possible. All will be on the ballot coming up. So,
Steve Daniels, I want to turn. There was this Bloomberg story that came out following some of our reporting detailing how an Aurora company, Scientel, has given big to Irvin, and it worked closely with Ken Griffin's Citadel to hook up a wireless network out there in Aurora to do high-frequency trading. The reason that's interesting is because the CME Group trading platform is right there in Aurora, and from our reporting and Bloomberg's reporting, we know that Irvin was instrumental in allowing Scientel to build a big communications tower here. Does it throw into question this notion that Ken Griffin was out there interviewing folks, searching for his ideal candidate, and just plucked Irvin out of obscurity?
I think that's what the story was hinting at. I don't think they connected those dots, to be honest. I think that Citadel is one of a whole bunch of trading outfits that benefits from that. And there was some indication that Citadel's done business with Scientel. I'm sure lots of other trading firms have done business with Scientel as well. I got why they had some information and they put it together. Certainly the Scientel Richard Irvin connections are obvious and easily documented, but in sort of hinting that Ken Griffin picked Richard Irvin as his guy because of that, I don't think they established that.
I don't think the story is concluding that, and nor in our reporting are we concluding that. But there certainly has been those connections out there. Before we go, because there's a few minutes left toward tip-off, is anyone planning on watching the Bulls game tonight? And you think they can beat Giannis and company? Lorraine, what do you think?
I think there's a possibility only because of the unfortunate injury to Chris Middleton. It's, you don't want to see someone get injured, especially at this time of year. But yeah, I think it is possible because
a little Caruso karma, maybe.
A little,
well, right, because he got whacked.
Grayson Allen.
A little karma. Could be some karma there.
Grayson Allen, that, of course, the controversial player on the Milwaukee Bucks. Mike Flannery, is Tony La Russa making the right decisions here with the White Sox with a great lineup and struggling out of the gate?
Yeah, if you had talked to me last weekend, I would have pointed out that in MLB.com's first power ranking of the season, the Sox were third. Then the bottom fell out. Look, Tony, I applaud any senior citizen who wants to keep working. I'm all for Tony La Russa.
All right, well, we'll keep following that, but we're out of time for now. So our thanks to Steve Daniels, Lorraine Forte, Mike Flannery, and Amanda Vinicky. And that's our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us tomorrow night for a special Chicago Tonight Voices crossover on addressing environmental racism. That begins at 6 o'clock. And then we're back here at 7 all next week. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great weekend.